Hey, Doug.
Yo.
You remember last week or the week before, one of these weeks where we were recording?
Nope.
And Mark was just talking nonstop about, I don't know, bunch of bullshit.
I'm like a goldfish. I only remember the moment before and after this moment.
In that he swims in his own poo.
That's right. Well, okay, Uncle Mark, I remember it a little bit.
Thank you. I put a lot of work into that.
You went to hell, is what you did.
I took us to hell and realized, it's not actually a place.
There's no there.
Surprise!
The closest thing is a garbage dump outside of Jerusalem that now, on Google Earth, looks like a very pleasant valley with a municipal road through it. So,
it's not. I would just have imagined a nice suburban subdivision.
They paved over hell.
Yeah, it's not a settler area yet. So far it looks like somebody's lawn. So, Gehenna, go check it out. So, last week we kind of talked about the hell of the Bible, or rather that hell is not really in the Bible. If you haven't heard it, go back and check last week out before you listen to this segment.
It's very upsetting.
But to summarize,
all the things that you thought you knew.
All the things you thought you knew are bullshit. It's kind of the Santa Claus of the Bible. All the things in the Bible are the Santa Claus of the Bible.
Wait, what?
To summarize...
Oh, no.
Oh, boy, I've really stepped in it this time. The much later insertion of hell into the Bible to clean up the messes that the four words that most people think are shorthand or folk names for hell is dumb, obviously not canon, and it's sloppy work to boot. Then we track the 5th century invention of the, quote, modern concept of hell and how it was fine-tuned and beta-tested for maximum terrorism over the centuries. So, for these and so many other reasons, should you believe in or be afraid of hell? The short answer is no. Also, the only answer is no.
The long answer, also no.
Is hell no.
So we could end it. We could end it there. We could end it there. So this is going to turn into a little bit of a how-to think about and contend with the idea of hell if it was something that was rammed into you without consent.
Which all of religion was.
Typically, yes. So I asked the good people of the internet to share their experiences with the fairy tale of hell, either in the past or the present, and I'm grateful for all the feedback. I'm sorry, there's no way we can possibly get to all of them. So here are some Uncle
excerpts. Mark, I feel like you made some promises. You got to get to all of it.
All right, strap in. Pack a lunch. So here's some excerpts from the avalanche of stories that flooded in, and there was a ton. So this is all very pleasant. From listener Mikey, fear of hell was the only thing that kept me in religion. I've never had any sort of spiritual feelings from religion and rejected the ideals that my church preached. I was getting nothing from religion except an intense fear that I was defective and God was going to punish me in this life and send me to hell for not believing enough.
Yeah.
I constantly heard from others about how they, quote, love Jesus, but to me, that sentiment was baffling. You don't love Jesus, you fear him, and I did.
Yeah.
Wow.
And this was, maybe I'll include it in the show notes. Mikey went to a church with a lunatic who did chalk drawings of hell while he preached.
Well, you know what? You got to get a gimmick, and I approve. I feel like that's a good gimmick.
It was a good gimmick. It's the guy it was a multitasking lunatic. So
yeah,
we
all watched a video of this guy, and yeah, one of you said he was the Bob Ross of
demonic Bob Ross.
Yeah,
the Bob Ross of hell.
Is somebody playing like a standing bass while he does this, like beat poetry?
Nope. He's just an old-timey rhythmic preacher. So, from listener Kim, the fear of hell is what really motivated me to dive deep into Christianity and to indoctrinate my 7 kids.
Holy cow.
Nothing frightened me more than the thought of them being tortured for eternity. Well, yeah.
Of course.
So I did everything in my power to fill their minds with nothing but religion. I homeschooled them, and our only activities were church. It's all we did, all we talked about. For a long time, my fear of hell and condemning my kids to hell pushed me into this super repressive cult. I had no autonomy. My body and life were not my own. I was a slave. She adds a little note. I didn't want 7 kids, but the only consent that mattered was, quote, God's consent.
Right.
Wow.
I still deal with that, the trauma of that little nugget. So,
well, that's fucked up.
Yeah. In order to save your kids from hell, you created it for them.
Yeah, and
Right.
Kim later in an email talked about how much guilt she's got wrapped up in that. And
yeah, and you know that's what I mean. I'm sure we'll get to this in the conversation, but listen, you were under the influence of some pretty heavy duty bullshit.
Right.
So
Yes.
I think we can all kind of release ourselves from a lot of the responsibility. I mean, you just don't know better.
People like Kim and a lot of the other people that wrote in, yes, you were under the influence, but now you're not.
Yeah.
And you know that. So you're doing what you can. And she mentioned that most of her kids are out of it, but a couple of them are still struggling with it. So,
well, no one's listening to this podcast because they don't have baggage.
Right.
Have not been traumatized by religion.
So
I don't know, Doug. I kind of think we're fun. I think it's a funny show and we have a good time.
We just get together and cry.
we laugh about people's pain. What could be more fun than that? So listener Sarah wrote that in her Full Gospel Baptist Church, quote, not only was hell a very real place, we teenagers were actually the front line of defense in the spiritual war against Satan's armies. We were taught that it was our generation's responsibility to save the world from hedonism, and she says, i.e., people having basic human rights. As a young person, I developed significant anxiety about my friends, family, and humanity in general burning in the lake of fire for eternity, and if they did, it would be my fault. Our church imprisoned us with this idea that our prayers and seeking visions from God through fasting were the only thing keeping the world from ending in flames. Further...
Wow, thank God they've been fasting then.
Yeah. Further, if a Democrat got elected or some other horrible tragedy, our leaders would blame us for it. Well, we didn't pray hard enough. God. I know. We didn't fast long enough. Our faith wasn't sincere, etc. So I spent several years as a teenager going through periods of starving myself or freaking people out with aggressive evangelism, believing if I didn't do these things, they wouldn't go to heaven.
Yeah?
Boy, election night 2008 must have been a terrible night for Sarah.
Oof, poor kid.
Yeah, hopefully we can deliver an equally terrible night
Let us pray.
in 2020.
Jax from Twitter wrote, I was told explicitly about the fires of hell and how much it will hurt for my skin to burn for eternity.
Oh, my God.
People are fucking insane. So, and it continues, as an atheist, for many years, I still have twinges of fear of hell, but then I remember I'm a critical thinker now.
Yeah.
But even so, he's still, every once in a while.
It makes sense. Like, these are this is like when it's ingrained in you from birth.
Yeah.
You're not just going to get rid of it with a thought.
Right.
Like,
No.
you're not, even though you have now brilliantly navigated those difficult waters of like, oh, maybe it's not real. Oh, wait, it isn't real. And you know on a sort of intellectual level for sure that there is no hell. That doesn't mean that the emotional shit just goes away.
Right, because hell was not implanted in your frontal lobe. Hell was not implanted in your higher brain. It was implanted in your fucking amygdala.
It's the same place that makes you scared of spiders and snakes. It's like...
Yeah.
And it makes you afraid of being on fire.
Yeah.
Like, literally, that's the place where you know to run away from a fire.
Yeah.
Well, and we are programmed to believe what our parents tell us. That is an evolutionary programming that happens to all animals, but specifically us with language.
Right.
You're supposed to believe what your parents tell you because your parents are supposed to tell you, don't go over there.
They're supposed to operate in good faith.
Right.
And we'll get to the discussion about hell and children. Oh, let me get through a couple more of these.
Fine, Uncle Mark.
It just makes it so much sweeter. Katrina from Twitter wrote, the belief in hell, a literal place of eternal fire and torment, coupled with the indoctrination of the not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven scripture, caused me to live with sometimes crippling anxiety about death and dying. Because death and dying aren't scary enough, right? So,
Right.
Alan from Twitter wrote, when I was stepping away from my faith, I recall vividly having nightmares about being in hell or otherwise being tormented by demons. For months on end, I could barely get any sleep because these nightmares wouldn't stop happening. And I'm going to finish with Ashley from Twitter here. Ashley wrote, I went to a youth conference called Dare to Share, and 2 is the number 2.
Oh, good.
Because it's cool.
Yeah, they're hip and young with the youth and the people.
I bet the 2 was kind of turned a little bit on the poster.
I think they're inspired by 2 Live Crew. For obvious reasons.
Yeah,
so.
the parallels are clear.
So Ashley said, I went to a youth conference called Dare to Share. And one year they had a dramatization on stage called A Letter from Hell about a teenage guy writing a letter to his Christian friend about how he's suffering in hell and asking, why didn't you tell me about Jesus? Ashley continues, unsurprisingly, tons of kids came to Christ after watching it because it was terrifying. As someone who is already saved, I had extreme anxiety and guilt about my friends and family members who didn't believe and what they would experience one day if I didn't convert them. And somebody on Twitter responded, who the fuck hasn't heard of Jesus?
Right?
So that's just a taste of what we received from the good people out there. Despite the differences, there is a common thread of this being a trauma first inflicted on very young children.
Yep.
So, dear uncles, and we kind of started touching on it, what in your opinion is the morality of teaching children that there is an eternal fire prison under the earth where fire will burn them forever for deviating from whatever it is you may happen to believe?
Well, I mean, obviously, as someone who has released himself from the bondage of religious thought,
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea just so that you can control the kids.
Right.
You do it anyway. But you get to make up your own scary story that you
Right.
I can go up to a crying kid on a plane and be like, look, buddy,
Yeah,
there's
exactly.
a lake of fire waiting for you if you don't shut the fuck up
You
right
will
now.
burn for eternity, child.
Well, it's funny. The elf on the shelf is a very, very mild version of this, right?
Yeah,
it's
right.
Oh my
it's just
God.
this controlling coercion. But think of it this way: if I went to if I went up to a parent and a kid in the park, right? Just a random stranger walks up to a 6-year-old and said, "Hey, see that tree over there? There's a troll that lives in that tree, and if you don't go to bed on time, he's going to rip your dick off and skin you alive,
Right.
and then eat you forever. Okay, see ya."
Right.
I mean, that guy's dad would follow me down and knock my teeth out.
You would be arrested,
Yep.
and
Right.
and rightfully so. Here's the thing: the first thing that I do want to get out is that, like we said, for one of those tweeters or writers in,
Yeah.
if you were a parent who put your kids through this, we get it. Like, you believed in a thing. You believed that their eternal souls
Unless
were
you're
in
an
hazard.
awful person, a cynical, awful person, you wouldn't have done it if you didn't believe it.
Right.
Right.
So I mean, it's not this. None of this is to make people feel guilty.
They already
for,
do.
for what
Yeah,
they've
yeah,
done to their
exactly.
kids.
They feel plenty bad.
But that said, this is a horrible thing to say to
Right.
children. This is I mean, you are basically creating nightmares forever for your children,
Right.
and it is immoral. It is ugly.
It's inexcusable. And so this is not to shame people.
Yeah.
No.
The goal of this is to hopefully provide some prophylactic against this in the future. Like,
Yeah.
Well, think about the derangement that religion can cause in a parent's mind, that they will debate the morality of telling their kids there is a Santa Claus or a tooth fairy, but without hesitation, they will terrify and traumatize their children about hell.
Yeah.
That, religion does that to people.
Well, and also there are a lot of parents. Ours were a little bit like this, where they use church, the church experience to kind of outsource some parenting to
Sure.
the kids can be there for a few hours. They can go to Sunday school, and they might not really be thinking about what's happening there.
Right.
Right. And I think you need to think about what's happening there.
Yeah.
Well, and also there's this, there's a sense of this is also a thing that's present in the minds of these parents. So when a kid, for instance, says, "Mom, Dad, I think I'm gay," or "Mom," or any number of things, they suddenly realize, well, shit, I've lost this one. If I can't bring them back into the fold, I have to cut them off
Right.
because Jesus will put me into that fire.
Yep.
And it's so yeah. I mean, it's not just the evil that you've the trauma that you're implanting into your child. You yourself are also traumatized, and it can cause you to do horrific things.
Right. This is like the cycle of abuse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. It's very hard if you've come from an abusive situation, whether it was physical or psychological or sexual or whatever. It can be very, very hard to break that cycle. And this is an emotional, mental form of abuse. And it's so terrifying that parents will perpetrate it on their children.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they're so scared of the whole prospect.
Right. And it's specifically designed so that in order to avoid hell, if you believe in hell, you have to implant the people around you with the same fear.
It's completely insidious.
It's a virus that is programmed to self-replicate.
And what's funny about it, too, is, one of the first questions you get asked as an atheist by particularly Christians is, well, what do you think happens after we die?
Yeah.
And, our response is, well, my response at least is, I don't know. I think nothing.
Yeah.
Which, in the context of this conversation, would be a relief.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no lake of fire waiting for me. There's
Right.
no eternal misery. Shouldn't you be happy about that at least?
Yeah. And so that kind of, I should say there's a funny aside. A guy tweeted in about this whole children thing, Adam from Twitter, who said, I do confess as a youth minister, I showed a clip of Tim Curry as the horned beast from Legend as an illustration of hell. So ashamed of that now. But it gets to, this other question, which is, leaving the children thing aside, what is the morality of thinking that the Jewish family down the street or the gay guy up the way are going to spend eternity swimming in lava because some random guy in your church who believes that the Left Behind series is prophetic said so? Or what is the morality of wanting people who read a very slightly different version of the Bible than you do to spend countless billions of years in the 3 million degree Kelvin incinerator that is hell?
Or fucking just another Christian who doesn't Christian hard enough.
That's another element of this insanity is hell is not just for Hitler.
No.
If you're a Christian. Hell is for the Lutherans.
Yeah.
And hell is for, what is it with the United Methodists that just split?
Yeah, or
Hell is for the other side.
right. Whoever's not Christianing my way and my way to the correct degree.
The perfectly religious Jewish family that worships the same God you do.
Right.
A guy who's just one sin below the line.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, he jaywalked one too many times.
Does the ritual wrong or doesn't pronounce the word right.
Right.
Everyone's going to hell.
As we talked about last week in that British children's book of hell, the girl who wore her dress about the town.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
She's going to hell forever.
Yeah.
So
Enjoy your fire dress.
there are people in every let's just leave it with the United States for a moment. There are people in every fucking neighborhood in this country who you pass on the street and you wave as you drive by, your neighbors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who look at you, and in their mind, it's completely okay to think that single man or that divorced woman is going to burn forever, and that's fine.
Right.
It's how it has to be.
That is so psychotic to me.
It is. There's nothing good that can come from it. I
Right.
mean, and even if it's a motivator to do good things, there are a million better motivations for someone to do a good thing than the belief that you or they will end up in hell forever.
Yeah.
There's no good that comes from this.
There is no good. There is no good at all. I mean, parents
Yeah.
thinking that their queer kid or whatever, their kid that just doesn't go to church every Sunday,
Right.
their own child is going to burn in hell forever. We don't talk about this enough as a society.
Right.
I agree.
We do not talk about the fact that there is this psychosis abroad in the land where people think this is an acceptable thing.
Right.
Obviously, they haven't done any of the examination to figure out what the evolution of the idea of Christian hell is.
Right.
And how absurd it is. But leaving that aside, they accept that there is an eternal furnace where their fellow people on the PTA board,
Nearly everybody.
their kids' teacher, nearly everybody in the world is going to go.
Right. Entire civilizations that just happened to be born without Jesus.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, as we talked about in the first segment, the Old Testament prophets
Yeah.
are in hell.
Right.
Because Jesus hadn't come yet. So, I personally think that's part of the reason, at least in this country, our criminal justice system is so fucking awful.
Right.
Because the good Christian men that write the laws, they think the torments of hell are a perfectly good thing for bad people to suffer. And secondly, throw a kid into solitary for 20 years because it's not as bad as hell.
Right.
Yeah, and
It's an infection.
Well, and it also presents a model of punishment. And frankly, for adult humans, punishment means nothing. You know what I mean? Punitive, punishment isn't what people are trying to avoid. What we should be doing with imprisoned people is attempts at rehabilitation.
Yes, exactly.
And-
not retribution, but rehabilitation.
Right. We should be enfranchising people back into society so that they can be productive members of society rather than punishing them and then just ensuring that once they get out, they are broken people, or they are
who can never function
exactly
again.
right.
or they go back to
Crime.
criminal ways.
But this belief in hell and eternal punishment informs these people who are passing laws that make it so ex-felons can't vote, the extending prison sentences for all kinds of crimes. The whole idea is you do something wrong, you pay a debt to society. Once you've paid that debt, you're back.
Right.
But if you believe that evil is forever and punishment is forever, then you throw away the key.
Yeah, and on top of that, if you believe that it says several times in the Bible and other canons that people are a certain color because of sin in a different life,
Right.
then what does it fucking matter? Like, this is such an infection on every level of our society. So I'll kind of close it up by saying, hell as we know again, which is not really in the Bible, and the Bible cannot be used for evidence of it, is a form of terrorism. It's a preposterous lie and an inexcusable form of abuse to plant in the fertile, trusting mind of children. It causes a lifelong, and our listeners talk about this in all of the things they send in, it causes a lifelong series of traumas that some people can never escape, even if they want to. It disfigures the human mind and makes living an intellectually and emotionally free, healthy life nearly impossible.
Yeah.
Consciously mutilating another person, especially a child in this way, ought to be a fucking crime. So, here's my how-to advice on this. If your children are in an institution that uses the technique of teaching hell to enforce conformity to whatever, get them the fuck out. Or at least help inoculate your children against an unauthorized adult trying to plant it in them by properly explaining that the idea of wanting people different than you to be on fire at all,
Right.
let alone forever, is an evil one and a ridiculous one to boot. And just as infuriatingly, there was a story about that kid who killed himself, and the Catholic priest got up and said, well, he's in hell now, and like teenager, right? So the process of losing a loved one is pretty fucking awful. To have someone who somehow feels authorized to intrude into your family's pain and say your relative is going to eternal torment because some asshole doesn't know how to read a book they claim to love, again, it was as the case of this 17-year-old kid, the priest saying at his funeral, he's going to hell forever, and the father asking more than once for him to stop. I would say the curb outside should await their unwelcome ass. And I would suggest if someone intrudes into your pain like that, make it a day that they'll never forget. So I just think this is one of the most weirdly under-examined problems in our society. And I hope this is helpful, because I think we should think about it more.
Yeah.
Yep, I agree.
So,
and if anybody ever tries to scare you in this way, tell them to go to hell.
Go to hell.
Go to blazes. All right. Well, with that, let's move on.
Moving on.